Hello, welcome to Basic Principles of Student Misbehavior. I am Lauren Ezzell. I am the behavior specialist with CUES. I have a master's degree in psychology, and I'm specialized in applied behavior analysis. So today we're going to go over some of the basic things that we see all students do and the common pitfalls that we all fall into and how to avoid them. So when we are looking at students' behavior, we need to go back to the basics. We need to remember our ABCs. Antecedent, behavior, and consequence. So when looking at our ABCs, it's really important to look at it from the student's perspective. We're not always going to have the same perspective as a student. And addressing the behavior from the perspective of the adult is not likely to change the behavior for the better. In fact, we may inadvertently reinforce negative behavior and make it worse. So the antecedent, the A in our ABC, stands for is antecedent, and it's also known as the trigger. So the thing that causes the behavior to happen. It happens immediately before the behavior. Now, a very common thing that I hear is that it just happens. I ask, so what happens when what causes the behavior? And they say, it just happened. Nothing caused it, it just happened. Now, some antecedents may be harder to see, but they're still there. There is still something triggering that behavior. Things to consider when identifying an antecedent. So when we're trying to figure out what is triggering this behavior, we need to look at where does the behavior occur? Is it in a certain classroom? Is it at school? Is it at home? Is it in the library? With whom does the behavior occur? Are there certain teachers that the behavior occurs more frequently with, or certain peers that we see the behavior occur more often with? When does the behavior happen? What time of day? Is it before lunch or is it after lunch? Are they hungry? Are they full? Are they tired? Beginning of the day, they're tired. End of the day, they're ready to go home. What activity is occurring when the behavior occurs? Are you working on math? Are you working on English? What are other students doing during the behavior? Okay, so when we have a kiddo with constant behavior problems, it's really common for us to just kind of zero in on that kid and that behavior. So I really, really encourage you to look around the classroom. What are other students doing? Are other kiddos engaging in the same behavior, but are we just so zeroed in on this one kid that we're not seeing the other behavior? What are other teachers or adults doing? Are there paras or IAs in the room that may have inadvertently, triggered a behavior? Did their favorite IA walk in the room and go and talk to someone else instead of them? Possible contributing factors for antecedents, specific staff. Like I said, is their favorite para in there? And are they not talking to them? Or is there a para that they do not get along with, or a teacher that they just don't gel with? Proximity to others. Are people in their personal space, or are they in other people's personal space? Noise level. How noisy is it? Let's think about kiddos with sensory regulatory issues. Is it really noisy? Is it hard for them to focus? Number of people around. Is it a really big classroom? Are there a lot of kids in there? Or are you in an assembly or the library with a ton of people? And then other environmental conditions. What are some other things? Is the door to the hallway open or closed? Is it open and a class is moving to a different transition? Is the hallway really noisy? Is the light flickering? Did the air conditioning just kick on and it rattles? So An example is my husband has a traumatic brain injury and therefore has some sensory regulatory issues. And he was telling me that when he was in high school, he grew up in Layton near Hill Air Force Base. And when he was in high school, the teacher would be giving directions and then the jets would fly over and it was so loud. And because of that sensory regulatory issue he had, all he could focus on was the jet. That's all he could focus on. And so he would miss the direction, what the teacher told him to do. So then he would kind of act out, kind of as a coping mechanism for the fact that he did not know what was going on. And the teacher was thinking, this just happened. He just started misbehaving. But really, it was an environmental condition that caused him to not hear the instructions. Okay, so yeah, he wasn't following directions, but there was something that triggered that behavior. So when looking for the antecedent, it's so important that we look at the environment. We look at what could be going on and could be affecting the kids and their learning. Now, I know I showed you the cute little graphic with the ABCs, but we're going to throw 2 more blocks in there. We're going to throw in the SEs. We're going to throw in setting events. Now, these are something that are often confused with an antecedent or the trigger. This is something that occurs outside of the situation, though. The antecedent happens directly before the behavior. The setting event occurs outside, and it acts as a setup for the behavior. So an example would be the student didn't eat breakfast, so they're hangry. And hunger is a real life event, right? I know I get hangry. My husband has learned that when we go to football games, a setting event strategy for him is going to be to feed me before we get to the stadium, because I'm going to be so much happier to be there if I am fed. That's a setting event strategy. So did they eat breakfast? How did they sleep? Were they up really late? Maybe they were coming home from grandma's house and didn't get home until midnight. Are they super tired? Is there a med change we don't know about? Or maybe right before walking into class, there was a big fight with their friend in the hall. Their best friend, they had the biggest fight, and now it's so hard to focus on school. These are setting events. These can affect the behavior. They can set up the behavior. So then you get there and this kid is already grumpy because he didn't sleep well. He's so tired. And then you give him an academic demand in a class that he doesn't like. You give him a math worksheet and he just hates times tables. Antecedent. So you've got your setting event and your antecedent. All right, so behavior. This is what the student does. This is what is occurring. This is what you're either trying to decrease or increase, right? Now, when you are describing the behavior, it is so important to be specific. What does it look like? Pay attention to how you describe it. So, for example, the other night we were watching my 4-year-old nephew, and he started to, my husband gave him a direction, and he didn't listen. He did not comply with the direction. He ran off. He continued throwing the thing he wasn't supposed to throw. He told my husband no. So when I get back with them, my husband says, McCoy's not listening. I told him to do this, and he gave me attitude. And I said, okay, well, what did he do? Well, he gave me attitude. Okay, but what did he do? Like specifically, what was that? He gave me attitude. Gave me attitude doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't tell me what he was doing. He didn't tell me that he continued to throw the object and then he continued to run away and say no. Okay, so you need to be able to describe the behavior so that when anybody comes in the classroom, they know exactly what they're looking for. So if you were to send a referral to me and you told me he gave me attitude or that he was aggressive, Okay, well, what does aggressive look like for this kid? I might come in and think, oh, yeah, that looked pretty aggressive, but that's not the behavior you're seeing. Aggression for one kid might be ripping up their paper, throwing it on the ground, and hitting their hands on the desk. Whereas aggression for another kid is flipping the desk. You need to be very specific in how you describe the behavior. What does it look like? So a bad example of a description of a behavior is Johnny refuses to work. Okay, how? How is Johnny refusing to work? Does he say no? Does he eat his worksheet when you give it to him? What does that look like? What does Johnny's work refusal look like? So a better example is when given an academic task, Johnny lays his head on his desk and pushes his worksheet off onto the floor. If I were to walk into a classroom, I would know exactly what to look for because this is a good description of a behavior. I know what triggered the behavior. I know what the student did, what it looked like. Now, consequence. When we hear the word consequence, we often associate it with a negative. We think it's like a punishment, right? But a consequence is what happens immediately after the behavior. So this can be both positive and negative. Giving a kid a Skittle is a consequence. It's a consequence for that behavior. Okay, it does not mean bad. But when we're looking at consequences, it's really important to go back and look at things from the student's perspective, okay? If we are not paying attention to the student's perspective, we may inadvertently reinforce undesirable behaviors, okay? Now, don't worry. We have all reinforced undesirable behavior. We have all reinforced that bad behavior. Okay, my name is Lauren, and I sometimes inadvertently reinforce undesirable behavior. We have all reinforced it to the point of making it worse. So I have 2-year-old twins. Yeah, I know, right? And something about 2-year-olds, they get sassy, right? And mine are super picky eaters. And it's super frustrating. So we were eating dinner and my little boy is yelling. He's playing with his food. He's hitting his table. He's just not having it. And I'm over here kind of getting all cocky like, I am just going to ignore this behavior. I am withholding reinforcement. He just wants my attention. I'm thinking, okay, I'm a behavior specialist. Like, you can't get to me, kid. Like, I got this. But then my little 2-year-old picks up his plate and throws it across the kitchen. And what do I immediately do? I go, oh, James, you don't throw your plate. You keep your plate on your tray. You don't throw your food. We don't do that. That's not a good choice. What did I do? I gave him attention. I reinforced that negative behavior. This kid wanted my attention, and guess what? He got it. Guess who throws his plate more often now? Yeah. I mean, him throwing that plate might as well have just been a mic drop. Because it's like, yeah, take that, you behavior specialist. Okay. We all do it. Even those of us that really, really understand behavior, when that's like all we do. Okay. It's so common. So we have to be so aware of it. Okay. Now for school, what if, let's say you've got a kid that hates math. You know this kid hates math, right? They struggle with it. It's not their favorite. Now you give them their math worksheet and they start kicking their desk. And you go, you know what, Johnny, go out in the hall. Go sit in the hall. I'm done. Go sit in the hall. And you're thinking, that'll show him. What did Johnny not want to do? He didn't want to do his math. And then he was kicked out into the hall, and guess who didn't have to do their math? Okay, so what is he more likely to do in the future to get out of math? He's going to kick the desk again, right? It's worked for him in the past. Or what if your student really likes your attention you are busy with another kiddo, you have given them the direction to get to work, and they start ripping up their math sheet. And you run over and you scold them and you're like, hey, Johnny, we don't rip up our paper. We can't do that. And he's sitting here like, attention, sweet attention, right? Just like my son. He threw the plate and he's like, yep, I've got mom's attention. Okay? Pay attention to what is reinforcing for the kiddo. Now, I know you're probably thinking, but Lauren, sometimes we have to intervene. We can't just always ignore negative behavior. And you are absolutely right. You cannot always ignore it. So there are some situations where you do have to step in, even if it may reinforce. And that situation, the most important one is safety, okay? Keeping everyone safe always comes first, okay? You have to weigh that risk to benefit ratio. So another example would be the disruption is just too high, okay? It's your Christmas program and you've got a kiddo just screaming in the middle of it. He's sitting there screaming. Yeah, you're gonna have to remove that kid. You're gonna have to pull them out. You know, it's not fair to the other kids or the parents that are there to hear their little angels sing, "Here comes Santa Claus," right? So you're gonna have to, that's a situation where you weigh the risk to benefit ratio. Now, when a child's negative behavior is maintained by attention from adults, attention from peers, attention from staff, these are things that will not work for those behaviors. Verbal reprimands, threats, yelling, lectures, nagging, that's not going to do it. That's going to reinforce that attention-seeking behavior. Okay? If your student wants your attention, they don't care if it's negative. We think, oh, well, I'm going to get mad at them and they're not going to like it. But if your student is seeking your attention, they don't care. Your attention is attention. Whether you're getting after them or you're patting them on the back, attention is attention, okay? Now, don't worry. You're probably thinking, well, that's just going to let them get away with it. That's not true, because they can't get away with the behavior if you are not reinforcing it. So if a student's behavior is attention maintained and you give them that attention, that's actually how they get away with it. That's what they're doing to get away with that behavior. Okay? It's not by ignoring an attention-seeking behavior, you are actually not letting them get away with it. Now, if your student is trying to escape a certain task, their behaviors are to get out of doing work or get out of going to library. This will not work for escape behaviors. Time out, go sit in the hall, go to the office. Doing these things allow the student to escape the work or task that they were trying to escape in the first place, which is very reinforcing. Chances are they'll do it again. Now, I want you to really remember this. Do not give a kid a break following a bad behavior. Again, do not give a kid a break following a bad behavior. Make sure they only get a break when they ask for it appropriately. Or if you have recognized a trigger is about to happen and you can see that it's going to head that way, quickly catch it here and give them the break here before the behavior occurs, and you give it here. Because if you give it after the behavior occurs, you're reinforcing the behavior. You're reinforcing the likelihood that that behavior is going to occur again, okay? Now, told you we all inadvertently reinforce bad behavior. We all do it, okay? Let's look at behavior escalation, or rather how we make kids worse over time. So we've got our adult and our kid, and the adult asks a question makes a request in question form, and the kid ignores them. The adult says, Johnny, can you get out your math book? And they just ignore. So it starts with verbal prompts like, okay, Johnny, it's time to get your math book out. Let's go. Okay, come on, let's get going. And they delay. They're stretching. They're fiddling with their pencil. They're clicking their lead. So then comes the small threats or the warnings. Okay, the teacher's kind of getting upset, and the student starts to argue. Then a large threat. That's it. You're missing recess. You can't get this out. You're missing recess. And the student starts to tantrum. They're showing aggression, whatever aggression looks like for that kiddo. So then the teacher quickly backpedals and they withdraw or change that request, and they start to negotiate with the kid. And the tantrum/aggression stops. Okay? And you're thinking, I am actual magic. I just stopped that tantrum. Way to go. Go me. But what happened? We ended up reinforcing a worse behavior than the behavior we started with. We started with ignore, but we reinforced tantruming. Okay? That's so common, and that's not what we want to do. Okay, so the problem behavior I see the most, and it was the problem behavior we saw at the very beginning of that step, is non-compliance or the gateway behavior. It leads us to harder stuff. Okay, this is typically the root of where these problem behaviors occur. Okay, non-compliance. If we address that non-compliance in that first step, we could have avoided reinforcing that aggression. So the way we give directions can affect compliance. I want you to watch this video and listen to the wording that, these are my children, listen to the wording that my husband uses.
Can you guys share it? Oh, crap.
No, she cannot. No, she cannot share it. Well, so he's saying, can you share it? He's not giving the direction, okay, you need to share the heater vent. She loves the heater vent. She loves dresses and she loves heater vents. But he's giving the option, can you? And she's saying, no. So when you are giving these directions, when you are in your classroom and you hear yourself, can you get out your math book? I want you to think about my little girl shoving her brother and saying, no, I cannot. This affects compliance. So let's look at precision requests. This is tried and true, a great way to encourage compliance, and it teaches compliance, okay? But it also gives you as a teacher a plan of how you're going to reinforce, a plan of what you're going to do if the student doesn't comply. Now, remember that not every kid is motivated by verbal praise. Having a plan is very important. Know what is going to reinforce that specific kid if they comply. So with precision requests, we start with the name, direction, followed by please. So Johnny, get out your math book, please. And then you're going to wait. This step is so important. You're going to wait 3 to 5 seconds for students with no language delays and 7 to 10 for students with language delays. Now, during this wait time, the direction does not have to be finished by the end of that wait time. It has to be started. So this is a processing time. You're letting them process the request. Because if you keep saying, okay, Johnny, get out your math book, please. Johnny, get out your math book, please. Johnny, get out your math book, please. That's the same thing as pressing enter on your computer a bunch of times. It's not making it faster. You're just sending the same request and it ends up slowing it down. Okay, that's the same thing with kids because that first request is still rolling around up here. Then you send in another one, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one. So it's going to slow it down, okay? You're slowing down their processor. Okay, so Really focus on the wait time, because typically the amount of time people give from direction to the second direction is 2 seconds, 1 to 2 seconds. I don't even react that fast. Okay, and I like to believe I'm pretty good at following directions, but 1 to 2 seconds, sometimes that's even hard for me to get up and get going, okay? And especially for kiddos with a language delay, you have to give that processing time, that 7 to 10 seconds. Now, if the student complies, you reinforce, you are, woohoo, great job following directions. Now, if they don't, you have a plan. You know exactly where to go. Go to step 2. You go to the need step. Johnny, you need to get your math book out. So name, need, direction. Again, you're going to wait that 3 to 5 seconds or 7 to 10 for students with language delays. If they comply, woo, reinforce. But if they don't, this is where we go into a pre-planned consequence. This is so important. This is one of the main things that I recommend when I go into schools is having a pre-planned consequence, whether it's a positive or a negative. Make sure it is planned. You're going to label the behavior. That's not following directions, because following directions is the behavior you are trying to encourage, to increase, to reinforce. Not necessarily the getting the math book out, but the following directions, because you want this to generalize to other activities, not just getting your math book out. So and then you label the consequence. That's 10 seconds off of recess. Okay. Keep it small. And I promise you, 10 seconds off of recess doesn't sound like much, but kids work for it. When all of their classmates go out and they have to sit there for 10 more seconds, we just talked about how waiting 10 seconds, that sometimes feels like a long time, right? That's how it is for kids when they're waiting that 10 seconds to go catch up with their friends. It's small and it's effective, but you are not taking away that entire recess. So your pre-planned consequence was applied and they didn't comply. Your pre-planned consequence was applied. You wait 30 seconds to 1 minute. You're given differential attention to other students. Hey, Sally, your penmanship looks so great today. Oh, Billy, thanks for getting your math book out. Way to go, man. Great choice. Great job following directions. Hey, they didn't comply. They didn't do it. You're going to start again with that please step. And I know you're thinking like, I don't have time for this. I want you to think about when you have a student, after we have gone through those steps and we've made the student that behavior worse, I want you to think about how much time this one kid is taking from your day. How much time are you dedicating to try to stop that behavior right then and there, that aggressive behavior? Behavior kids, a lot of the times they take a lot of your day. But by doing this, you are systematically teaching, following directions. This is going to save you time in the long run. Okay, it's research-based, it's tried and true. Try it. So you're going to repeat with the please step. Now, the importance of pre-planned consequences. Consequences are reactions to behavior. Okay, how are you likely to react to a negative behavior? Probably with your emotions. You might be angry. You might shame the kid. Not like intentionally, but you might, You're reacting. You're reacting to something that's already frustrating to you. And reacting with your emotions is not going to be super effective. So you also are likely to go into empty threats, and some more empty threats. Remember how we make kids worse? We keep making these threats and then it's like, oh, sorry. Okay, empty threats. You have no follow through and kids pick up on that. They know, all right, she's told me for 5 days that I'm missing a recess and I've never missed a recess, right? You react with steps that are too big. No recess. And he's like, I just didn't get my math book out. Okay, make a plan. Take the guesswork out of it. Pre-plan consequences for both positive and corrective situations. So know how you're going to reinforce the kid if they comply, and how you're going to react, how you're going to curb the behavior if they don't. Look at a consequence hierarchy. This is going to help take the guesswork out of it for you. So this is for kids that don't follow the need step. So the guidelines for a hierarchy is small. You do 4 to 5 small steps. It's inconvenient, but it's inconvenient for the kid, not for you. Don't make your life harder, okay? And it's a hierarchy, which means each step gets a little bigger. So with the small steps, you don't want to use your most severe consequence first, because if it doesn't work, you have nothing left. It's like, oh, I played all my cards the first round. Okay, start small and build. So some ideas for hierarchies for like school is recess time loss. Like I mentioned, is that 10 seconds. You pull 10 seconds, 10 seconds, 10 seconds, 10 seconds. Means you could pull 6 times, but the kid's only missing 1 minute of recess. It's effective, but that kid is still going to get out to recess, because sometimes these kids are the kids that need the recess the most, right? Or you may offer the class 5 non-contingent free time minutes at the end of the day. And when they don't follow directions, you pull 30 seconds. 30 seconds off free time, 30 seconds off free time. Okay, or passing time for in between classes for older kids, like high school kids. It could be they have to wait until 3 minutes before the bell rings. They still get to class on time, but they're missing out on that socializing piece that happens in between classes. Or iPad minutes, if they have iPad minutes that they have at the end of the day, or 3 minutes at the end of resource, SLP groups, guidance groups, etc. Now, in your consequence hierarchy, there's a severe clause. This typically involves removal from the instructional setting. So this happens after the 4 to 5 small steps, okay? Or if there's any physical aggression towards others or objects. So you want to make sure that aggression is taken care of real quick, okay? You want to make sure that it is hit with the severe clause, because if you let it continue, it's going to get worse. Now, the severe clause is typically applied by the administration. So this would be in-school suspension, time out to another class, lunch or after school detention. Now, for younger kiddos, you might say, that's not following directions. I will need to help you. And that might be a physical prompt, but it's the same consequence each time. Now, this is not good for older or aggressive kiddos. Okay, so you label it, that's not following directions, no iPad. Or that's not following directions, that's 20 seconds off recess. That's not following directions, that's 20 seconds off recess. So it's the same consequence. And then it's followed by 15 to 20 seconds of planned ignoring. Now, let's talk reinforcement. Okay, reinforcement is the key to getting more of the behavior you want. This is what you want to see more of. And the way to see more of it is to reinforce it. Okay, the most common thing I hear is reinforcement is not bribery. Everybody says, I don't want to bribe them. I shouldn't have to give them bribes. You're right. You should reinforce. Reinforcement is not bribery. Okay? Reinforcement or rewards earned as an incentive are earned as an incentive for for increasing a desired behavior. So you do this desired behavior and you're reinforced as an incentive to do that behavior again. Bribes, on the other hand, are given as a response to challenging behavior. So with that teacher what started withdrawing the requests and negotiating, that was bribing. That was not reinforcing, that was bribing. Reinforcement are earned as an incentive to do that behavior again, okay? Now, reinforcing positive behavior is no different from being paid to work. My boss gives me a paycheck for the work I do. Now, I am reinforced to continue working. If they weren't paying me, chances are I wouldn't show up to work, right? We all say we're not in it for the money, but that's not true. I mean, we have to have a paycheck, right? It's reinforcing. It keeps us coming back. Now, reinforcement versus punishment. Punishment may stop the behavior in that specific moment, but reinforcement changes the behavior. It changes the behavior. It encourages an increase of future positive behavior. Punishment just stops it in that moment, okay? It may feel easier to react with an emotional punishment, but that's just duct tape on a bumper, okay? It's a temporary fix. Now, effective reinforcement systems are planned out. The student knows exactly what they're working for and how to earn it. They're not all or nothing. You want to set the kid up for success. So an example of all or nothing is schedule all completed for the prize versus points per task. So a full class-wide token board system has to be filled out before lunch to get early recess versus each tally mark you earn counts as 10 seconds. So they're still getting something for that positive behavior. That's motivating. If the kid doesn't want to work for it, they're not going to work for it. Just because it sounds motivating to you doesn't mean that it's motivating for the student. Reinforcers are switched out. Mix it up. Have you ever eaten an extra piece or pieces of pie, and by the end of the night, the thought of pie makes you sick? That's a bad example. That never happens to me. What about if you are playing one game on your phone consistently? You're playing it constantly for weeks, and you start to get bored with it. So you stop going and clicking on it to play it. It's because you got satiated. You got tired of it. Kids get tired of the same reinforcers. Mix it up. Now, I was raised by teachers. Two of my three siblings are teachers. I understand how much money you guys pour into your classroom every single year. And I know that trying to buy reinforcers is hard, okay? Reinforcers don't have to cost you money. Look for the free reinforcers. What is already available to you? Time is a powerful reinforcer and can be applied to many activities, even for older kiddos. Kids will work for getting out of class early. Look at experiences over tangibles. Do they get to be the teacher's math helper for the day? Do they get to be the office courier? Do they get to take things to the office for the teacher? Okay, look at things like that that are free to you. I've got a friend that's a behavioralist as well, and she was telling me the story of a teacher that she knows that had a bunch of zucchinis in her garden one year, just tons of zucchinis. And she decided one day that she was going to just bring them to school and let the kids work for zucchini. That was her best behaved day for the whole year because those kids wanted those zucchinis. I can only imagine what those parents thought when they came home with all these zucchinis. But use what you've got. Kids will work for obscure things like zucchini. So some examples, I keep mentioning the 10-second tallies. This is super effective. I know it doesn't seem like much, but kids will work for it. They will work for that 10 seconds early to recess. Hype it up. Be like, okay. Normally you would go 15 seconds from now, but in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go to recess. They will work for that. And you can keep adding it up. So for example, if you are doing a class-wide reinforcement system, which I really recommend, it has to be something super cute. I will just draw a grid on on the whiteboard and reinforce individual kids, but the reinforcement goes to the group. So, oh, Johnny, thank you so much for getting right to work. I see your math book is out on your table. Great job. That's 10 seconds. Oh, Sally, thanks for having a quiet mouth. Your eyes are on me. I can tell you are ready. That's 10 seconds. Okay, and it continues. Now, you can reinforce several kids. Now, you've reinforced 6 different behaviors, 6 positive behaviors you want to see more of. And the kids are noticing. They want to be the one that gets the point for the class. That's 6 times, and all you owe is 1 minute early to recess. Kids will work for this. Something I really want you to be aware of, though, is after you, after you give, after you give a reinforcement, so you've reinforced Johnny for having his math book out and being ready to go, and then Sally starts talking to her neighbor and being disruptive. You cannot erase that. That behavior does not negate the positive behavior. So a response cost has to be separate from your incentive, okay? So just because, or even if Johnny stopped paying attention, that does not take away the fact that when you asked, he had his math book out and he was ready to go. Once you give this reinforcer, you no longer have ownership over it. It no longer belongs to you. It is theirs. Okay, I really want you to think about it like that. You have given it for a behavior and it is no longer yours. You cannot take it away. Okay, a negative behavior does not negate a previously positive behavior. Okay, now another example is sticky feet. And I just think this is hilarious, so I always include it. The fact that they follow directions all through math, they earn this many points. We've got these tallies. You've been so great. Guess what? Take your shoes off. It's time for stinky feet. I totally would have worked for taking my shoes off in class. I hate shoes. I'm not wearing shoes right now. Okay, that's just an example of a free reward. If they come to school, they have shoes, right? Well, reinforce them by letting them take them off. It's a free reward that's already set up for you. Or you can give kids free time. Like we mentioned earlier, is the beginning of the day, they have 5 minutes at beginning of the day, you give them 5 minutes at the end of the day for free time. Or that would be your response cost where you take the 30 seconds. Or they can earn free time at the end of the day. Oh, great job being on task. I see your math book out. I see your eyes on me. That's 30 seconds free time. Oh, I love how Miss Sally is putting her papers away right when I ask. That's 30 more seconds of free time. Check out pbisworlds.com to see their ultimate list of PBIS incentives. On this site, you can actually hit free, and it will give you a list of ideas of free incentives to use. Again, check out pbisrewards.com. Also check out pbisworld.com. It will give you ideas for behavior intervention based on certain behaviors. If you're interested in understanding even more of the basics of behavior and how to understand the function of behavior, check out Basic FBA. Check out Basic FBA. Big thank you to Melissa Janot for some supplemental material. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to contact me. My email is on the CUES website. And I just want to reiterate to you that reinforcement is going to change this behavior. Punishment may stop it. It's a temporary fix. But reinforce your kids. Understand what is motivating their behavior. Understand what is causing their behavior. And thank you for listening. Mm.